great screenwriters say you get one conceit per film. You can make it anything you want. And Michael Gracey's like, yep, that's going to be the conceit. Welcome to the Lighter, Darker podcast, where we talk about the creative process of filmmaking and the art of visual storytelling. Thanks for joining us for episode 11, 11 of 20 planned for our first season, where we release every other Tuesday. I'm here, my co-host, Todd.
Hey, I'm Todd Vizaria, compositing artist and compositing supervisor at ILM.
And as always, our producer, Jenny.
Hello, Jenny Ely, production manager at ILM.
And I'm Rob Brado, Chief Creative Officer at ILM and SVP of Creative Innovation at Lucasfilm, and we all work together in the visual effects, animation, and immersive entertainment industries. And today is really fun. We're going to have an Oscar episode. We're going to talk about the 5 shows nominated for the Best Visual Effects Oscars and a little bit about that process. It's going to be really fun to dive into some of the artistry there. Before we start, we have to take a short detour back for some information correction from Misinformation Corner generated on this our very own podcast here, Todd.
Well, in the last episode, Amy mentioned that the traditional matte paintings that were done at ILM were done on shower doors. And in the middle of that episode, I said, I don't know about that. I think that might be some mythology. It might not actually be shower doors.
And I got to tell you, I've heard this mythology repeated in the hallways of ILM for all 10 years that I've been here. Probably once a week, I hear somebody walking by a matte painting telling the story of the shower doors, Todd.
Yep. So that was in my mind that it was mythology, and I did a little bit of digging. Talked to Craig Barron, who ran the matte painting department in the 80s here at Industrial Light and Magic, Oscar winner.
That's a pretty good source, Craig.
Pretty good. So this is what Craig wrote me about that. The glass paintings for Star Wars movies and other CinemaScope projects by the matte department were created on 2.5 foot by 6 foot aluminum framed glass. I'm not aware of any shower doors that are only 2.5 feet wide. These were, of course, custom made by a glass company that also happened to produce shower doors, which could be some of the source of that mythology. It was also important that the glass was clear and of good optical quality, as we sometimes projected images through the glass or behind the glass to combine the live action with the paintings. This is not the kind of glass that you find at Home Depot. So pretty clear. Pretty obvious.
Definitive. We're definitely shattering Amy's dreams.
Well, I will, Todd.
Oh, hold on. I also got the late J.W. Rinsler, who literally wrote the books about the making of Star Wars. It is, quote, "This is a myth. Several matte painters from the original Star Wars told me the shower door theory is not true." Also, Harrison Ellenshaw, who did some matte paintings on the Star Wars movie, said,
"Yes,
no way was that true." So, anyway, that's my reporting.
However,
that's your reporting. Those sources are pretty well placed, I gotta say.
But Todd, I will see your 3 sources, and I will raise you a Ralph McQuarrie. So, Amy, from our last episode, also got a message from one of Ralph McQuarrie's old pals, who said that Ralph himself used to pick up shower doors from the hardware store, tie them to his truck, and drive them into work. According to this source, Ralph made a point that with shower doors, you also knew you were getting tempered glass. So I guess he wanted to be sure.
Oh, that is amazing.
Where does this leave us?
We will never resolve. We're going to be in Misinformation Corner forever.
It lives on in VFX mythology. But I'm just happy because, Todd's almost always right about this stuff. And this time, I have a source that says he might not be. So,
is this an anonymous source from Amy? Amy wants to keep the myth alive. Is this what we're discovering?
This is an anonymous source, but I want to believe this, so I'm going to believe that this is true.
Okay, well,
I'm going to leave it that both can be true.
Otherwise,
Agreed.
we've been lying to people on ILM official tours for years, telling them that they're seeing shower doors.
No, there is a yes and version of this, isn't there, Todd? Which is the doors came from an official source that had really clean glass. All the things you just described by all the people who are the experts who were in the room at the time. That has to be true. And then did Ralph also pick up some shower doors himself sometimes and paint one on a shower door. I don't know. Were they out of doors one time? I don't know.
Shower door gate continues.
If anyone has any more information, please send it to Jenny, and we'll continue the dialogue on a future episode.
I will keep your identity secret. I will protect my sources.
Lighter, darker continues. Okay, so this is the Oscar episode, so we won't just talk about shower doors. By the way, I did the math. 30 inches isn't that narrow for a shower door. That's totally possible for a real shower door. So anyway, it is possible.
People
Okay.
were smaller in the 80s.
Oscar nomination episode. How did we even get here? Because we're down to the 5 movies that got nominated for this year's Oscar for Best Visual Effects, which is really fun. But we start the process with over 350 eligible pictures that could potentially be on that list. And some of you have participated and have seen this process in the bake-offs, but maybe many of you aren't familiar with how we get to this nomination. And it's a very involved process. It's a very cool process, I think. So the Academy each year forms what's called a Visual Effects Branch Executive Committee, or gets abbreviated sometimes BEC. It's about 40 to 50 experts in visual effects. These are Academy members in the visual effects branch who've been doing it a while. Half of that branch executive committee is made up of people who run for the positions and get voted in. And so anybody who's in the visual effects branch of the Academy can opt in to potentially serve on the branch executive committee. Then the other half is made up by appointees from the governors. And this is to make sure we get enough differing expertise and diversity in the group of the branch executive committee. So we want to make sure we always have special effects representation. We want to have people who have animation experience. We want to have all that experience in the room when we're debating these films. And the BEC is the group that narrows the field from the 350 down to 10, which is known as the shortlist. And that is what makes it to the bake-off. But the process isn't just a one-step process. First, we take all the eligible movies this year, there were over 300, and we divvy them up amongst the BEC members, and everybody has to watch between 10 to 15 movies that get doled out. So every movie gets seen, or at least researched heavily. Hopefully you get to see every movie, but some movies are really hard to see. It can be difficult to stream. Or to get to a theater to see some of these movies. But in general, every movie is watched from end to end by at least one BEC member, probably more, actually, because especially the ones that have a lot of visual effects, a lot of people are seeing. And then in a single meeting, we go through every one of those, let's say it's 350 movies, and put those on a ballot, the ones that have significant visual effects that could potentially be contenders to get a nomination. And usually there ends up being 50 or 60 movies that deserve to be on that ballot. If it's the movies that tend not to end up on the ballot tend to be a lot of documentaries or things that have very, very minimal visual effects. So any contenders end up on that ballot. There's discussion about some of the relative merits of those films, and then a secret vote is taken, and that narrows it down to not the 10 on the short list, but in this first round, it just narrows it down to 20. Because the idea here in the process is to cast a wide net, to make sure we're including any movie that could potentially earn a nomination. We want to make sure is on that list. And then we give the branch executive committee a week or two to go see, for every member to see all 20 movies. Because usually some movies make that list that you haven't seen. And you want to make sure you're making an informed vote. So everybody has to go away, gets to watch all 20 movies. If it's only a week, you have to watch a lot of movies every day if you're not keeping up with the work. And those 40 to 50 people regroup a week or two later. This year we had 2 weeks. And we get together and we watch a before and after reel for each of those movies that the producers and the visual effects supervisors and the team, the creative team that led that movie, have created for us. They're nice and short. They're variations on the 3-minute before and after reel that you're going to later see in the bake-off. So you get to watch these 3-minute before and after reels, one after another, for all 20 films, which can then help inform everyone's vote. They've seen the movie, they've seen the before and after reels, hopefully have enough information, done some research, enough information to vote for which of these 20 should make the short list. And then, a few days after that secret vote, we end up with the shortlist, which this year our shortlist was Alien Romulus, Better Man, Civil War, Deadpool and Wolverine, Dune Part 2, Gladiator 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Mufasa the Lion King, Twisters, and Wicked. And those were just those 10 films were in the Bake Off. Todd and I were talking before this. There's some amazing films this year. I mean, it's hard to make that shortlist.
First of all, I'm glad you described the coverage that is required by the executive committee about every single film that's eligible being seen or researched by someone on the executive committee. So, I mean, like, I just looked at the Best Picture nominees, and every single one of the Best Picture nominees has visual effects. Every major movie has visual effects of some kind or another. And until we really know what those visual effects are, a little bit of research, a little bit of viewing, you can't make an informed decision. So I'm so glad that the executive committee does that kind of canvassing. But, even to get to that 10, you look at some of these films that didn't even make the final 10, like The Substance, which had just crazy, amazing practical and digital work. The Zemeckis movie here, Beetlejuice, Godzilla x Kong, Furiosa, Challengers, which had some stunning shots. The First Omen. I just saw a visual effects reel for Horizon Chapter 1. Just amazing work to set the scene of that movie. And even a movie like My Penguin Friend, which could not exist without visual effects in one way or another. I mean, they didn't even make the Bake Off. And it just shows you how competitive things are right now in our wonderful branch of the work that's being done in this day. It's crazy. Those didn't even make the Bake Off.
So yeah, it is. The narrowing process is arduous, but also super challenging. You never know exactly who's going to make those 10 films. And you're right. Every year we have way more films that are highly qualified than can even make the Bake Off. Now, the Bake Off is an event that you and I have been going to for many years. People love the Bake Off. We did it virtually this year because it happened to take place at the same time the fires were hitting LA really bad that week. So we were grateful that Academy staff helped us pivot to an all virtual event and we could hold our live event. But do you want to just talk a little bit about the setting of the Bake Off? I can walk through what that process is, but it's really fun to get to see these films back to back.
The Bake Off is just an incredible event. It's a 4-hour, just, if you love visual effects, this is the place to be every year. Each of the 10 films gets to provide an introduction, usually by the head of department visual effects supervisor, typically. And while they're making that introduction, behind them, a 2 to 3 minute reel gets to play to help illustrate some of the work that's being done. It's not just finals, that they can actually provide behind the scenes footage and plate photography and animation of their reel.
And that was an enhancement that was made just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And it's such a good improvement to the process because all the work is so seamless. Until you see the befores and afters, sometimes it's hard to even know what was done using what technique.
Right. And then that is concluded with a now 10-minute reel of finished footage. This is the footage that if you had a film print, back when we were doing film projection, you had to actually snip together pieces of a release print of the finished product. It's a 10-minute reel, and then a very quick brief Q&A at the end. And then on to the next picture. And we do 10 pictures and it's about 4 hours. It's fantastic.
It's so much fun. And, I always go into the Bake Off having seen all the movies, researched them. I try to be as knowledgeable as possible. But every time when you watch the movies back to back, you see those reels, it's just getting to see them in a beautiful environment like the theater that we screen them in. Getting to see them back to back, it does inform your vote even more. You get to see all that work side by side, and it's always hard to compare, right? The work is always such high quality, but it really does inform your vote, which I'm really proud of the system the Academy uses for that.
Yeah.
Are the reels ever released to the public?
They're designed for the voting process. Some studios do release those 10 and 3-minute reels to the public to help inform other voters, but also just to kind of advertise how great the movies are. 10 minutes is a good, meaningful excerpt of the movie. So I see the 3-minute reels make the internet more frequently than the 10-minute reels. But in terms of attending the bake-offs, there was a time in the past that it was open to the public, but it is a voting meeting and they want to keep it very controlled. but I understand that in addition to an Academy member being able to bring a guest, so if you have a friend who's an Academy member, they're allowed to bring a guest to that event. So if you know somebody, that's one way to get in. But in addition to that, VES members are allowed to attend if they bring their VES membership card, if space allows in the meeting. So, of course, space is reserved primarily. Then this is a physical meeting that usually takes place in LA. But those seats are reserved for Academy members and their guests. But if space allows, which usually space does, and VES members can queue up and attend, which I think is fantastic. And I celebrate the fact that people, I loved, before I was an Academy member, I loved going to the bake-offs. It was just such an amazing education and a celebration of the work of the year.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're walking through the nomination process. We got to the shortlist. We got to the bake-off. The bake-off, the 10, are voted on by the entire branch of the Academy, the entire visual effects branch of the Academy, I should say. So that is the group. That's about, well, I can't remember how many members we have. There's like 10,000 people in the whole Academy, and I think we're like 800 or 900. I should look it up. So we have a lot of people who are eligible to vote. But in order to vote, they have to have watched all those reels, and new this year, they have to agree to have seen all 10 films in order to vote, which I think is great. We want informed people helping to narrow the field. And from there, we get to our 5 nominated films, and from there, the entire Academy votes on, of those 5 films, who is most deserving for Best Visual Effects of the Year, and that winner will be announced on the Academy broadcast. So
yeah. That's something for non-industry folks that have to understand that each branch determines their own nominees, and with the exception of Best Picture. And the final Oscars, the final nomination, the final winners are voted on by the entire Academy, which is, it's important to remember that.
That's right. So when people are on stage thanking the Academy, they literally are thanking those 10,000 people who voted for them that narrowed the field. And the Oscars this year are on Sunday, March 2nd. I think they start earlier. They started earlier last year, started at 4 p.m. They start at 4 p.m. again this year, which is great. That's Pacific Standard Time. That's a good time. So I think it helps the East Coast folks get to stay up for the last part of the show. I think it's a good choice to move that up 1 hour. Okay, so that's the Academy version for visual effects of how a bill becomes a law, how a movie gets a nomination or a win. And what we wanted to do on the rest of this show is go through and just celebrate the artistry of all 5 of these remarkable shows. A couple of these are shows that ILM worked on, but we're just here to honor all 5 of them. It's incredible work. And, you've heard people say it's an honor just to be nominated. Hopefully you can get a sense of how much of an honor it is to be nominated for an Oscar. Getting narrowed from 350 eligible pictures down to 5 by a jury of your peers is really an honor. And the Academy does a great job for all the nominees, I think, making them feel special and appreciated. And Todd and I are both Academy members. We're not going to say how we are voting. We're not going to try to tell you how to vote or who we think is going to win. That's not what this show's about. This is going to be about talking about some of the specific things that we noticed in these movies that we think is awesome and worth celebrating. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, Jenny, do you want to take us to our first nominated film?
Yes, and we're going to go through these in alphabetical order, in case you're wondering what kind of order this is. All right, so first up, we have Alien Romulus, and the nominees for Alien Romulus are Eric Barba, Nelson Sepulveda-Fowler, Daniel McCarran, and Shane Mahan.
Yeah, what an incredibly gorgeous movie this was. I mean, you know, pulling back to the just sheer beauty of science fiction dread and horror of the original movie, this one, Alien Romulus, absolutely delivers, and not just mimicking the original Alien in any way, shape, or form. It sets up the geography of what the characters are dealing with in such a way that you always understand where everybody is. It's always dreadful. It's always scary. And the visual effects had a huge part of that.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to call out the chestburster scene in this film happening on a ship as it's going out of control, right? More out of control, that mimics the horror of what's happening inside the ship. And we've seen a chestburster before. We know what's coming, and we're dreading what's coming. And the scene is dragged out to kind of intensify that emotion. And the actual practical effects that the team did to create that chest burster and the way they got the you can actually see the character breathing. You can see the blood pulsing through the semi-translucent skin. And there was some digital enhancement done on that work as well. But I got to say, I've seen a lot of the behind the scenes material. That particular creature was very successfully pulled off in camera. This wasn't one of those cases that you sometimes hear about where they'll do a creature on set and it gets 90% replaced in post. The chestburster scene was heavily achieved on set practically, which is very, very tricky work to do.
Yeah, I was going to mention two aspects of the visual effects that I really liked. I mean, other than what I already said, the environments and the ships that were partially miniatures and partially CG, the miniatures being photographed in such a way to emulate the aesthetic of the original Alien films, absolutely worked really well for me. The rings of the planet that were we look out, they're omnipresent. They're always out there in the windows, and it's a constant threat, especially when that clock is launched. Then the ship actually colliding with it. I absolutely loved the geography of all that. Everybody understood the scale, understood the threat. Absolutely beautifully pulled off.
The perfect ticking clock, right, for a movie like this, set in the vastness of space, but you give this geography like you're describing, and the fact that we're getting closer and closer to these rings over time, and it can accelerate at that point where it actually runs into the rings. Those shots were animated by the team at VFX, and they did. It was really, really beautifully executed.
And then having seen about a lot of the breakdowns in terms of the xenomorph itself, I absolutely was fooled on a certain couple of shots. I thought some were CG that were practical, some were practical that were CG, some were practical that had a limb added in computer graphics, or the combination. I was totally fooled. And while you're watching the movie, you're never thinking about that stuff. You're just thinking about the momentum and the danger of everything.
I love the xenomorph shot where we're first introducing multiple xenos and they're coming up that tunnel. And we are looking down that tunnel and they're coming up at you, and it's a strobe light behind you. You get those silhouetted xenomorphs. That shot is, they feel like spiders, but they're much bigger than that. The fact that they feel as believable as they are is really good success on the part of the team.
Absolutely.
Another standout sequence for me was I loved the conceit of being able to turn gravity off and on. And when they get trapped and they turn off gravity and everybody goes floating through, and you end up with the xenomorph acid floating in the air in this beautiful pose. It was a great design and a very, very suspenseful sequence. I love the way that was executed.
It's a different spin on the acid for blood. Once it's in 0G and you're just kind of trying to navigate around it like nothing we've ever really seen before. I thought it was a great sequence.
Yeah, there's so many solid sequences in that film, really beginning to end. And I think you called it out right at the very beginning, Todd, the photography, the beautiful photography to integrate into. And we've talked before on this podcast how important it is. And one of the things that I would say differentiates good visual effects from great visual effects is that collaboration with the cinematography. And when you have a cinematographer like on Alien Romulus, you have such good work to build on. Throughout the production of the film, there was a lot of references made to Gallo's cinematography, even during those all CG shots and the CG and miniature shots. And he actually consulted during the post-production as well, helping to keep the look consistent end to end, which I think is always a nice thing when that happens. Yeah. Great. Well, that is a good first look at Alien Romulus. Why don't you take us to movie number 2, Jenny?
All right. Next movie is Better Man. The nominees for Better Man are Luke Miller, David Clayton, Keith Hurft, and Peter Stubbs.
It's funny, the discourse around Better Man, especially here in America, is like, well, we don't even know who Robin Williams is. Well, that's why they made the movie.
That's right.
It's like, there's a lot of movies I didn't know anything about the main character before they made the movie. Now you see the movie.
Yes.
And what an enjoyable movie that is.
Oh, man. If you aren't aware, I guess we should have warned everyone there's going to be spoilers in this episode, but hopefully that's obvious. But if you aren't aware of the conceit of this film, it is... it's kind of unbelievable that a film like this was able to get made. because, well, like you're pointing out, not everybody in the U.S. knows who Robbie Williams is, right? But Michael Gracie, of course, was very familiar with him. And if you've heard him talk about the inspiration for this film, he has wanted to do this ever since he did Greatest Showman. And he grew up, Michael Gracie's Australian. He grew up knowing this music, of course. But he tells a fantastic story of Robbie Williams inspiring the cast on The Greatest Showman to actually have the confidence and kind of delivery. They were inspired by the fact that, you know, whether or not Robbie Williams is the best singer in the world, he's one of the best performers in the world for sure. And that's the kind of energy they wanted to bring to that movie. And Michael Gracie actually got to know Robbie Williams during the production of that film, and then just started talking to him, started getting his story, and realized he wanted to tell his story, but he didn't want it just to be your standard biopic. So the conceit of this film, if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's Robbie Williams, it's a biopic of Robbie Williams, except he's played as a monkey version of himself for the entire film.
Of course.
But nobody acknowledges it. No one says, why is that guy a monkey and everyone else is a human? It's just, that's just the conceit. And, you know, I've heard, you know, great screenwriters say you get one conceit per film, you can make it anything you want. And Michael Gracie's like, yep, that's going to be the conceit of this movie. And boy, did VFX did the character throughout this movie, I think end to end. And it is very, very nicely executed.
Yeah. One thing that blew me away, seeing the before and after reels, was the typical way we would do this would maybe potentially be a human in costume, and you would do a head replacement or a hand replacement, or have makeup effects on the hand, hairy hands or something like that. No, computer graphics, top to bottom, which puts a little bit of, the monkey aspect of the character has to be completely believable. The hair, the eyes, the skin, the everything. Not to mention all the clothing and all the interactions and all the paint outs that are going to be required. Really an incredible accomplishment for this movie.
One of the standout sequences in the film, and this one they actually have put online if you haven't seen it, is the Regent Street scene in Better Man. And again, hearing from behind the scenes of the production, nobody shoots on Regent Street in London, right? It's like closing down Times Square. You just can't close down Times Square. You can't close down Regent Street. This was set at night, and they had worked their butts off. This was a more of an independent film, and it wasn't a huge $250 million blockbuster film. As you can imagine, they had to back into a budget that made sense for this movie. So they worked really hard to get all the permits, and they rehearsed the dancers, they rehearsed the stunties, they rehearsed the team to pull off this Regent Street musical number in the middle of the show, which is about 4 or 5 minutes long. Yeah, it's very ambitious. Interior, exteriors mixed, all these different components. So they had the whole system down, and that was, sadly, the week that the Queen of England died, and they shut down everything right the day or the week that they were going to shoot on Regent Street. And there was no permits going to be issued for filming, of course, that week, especially some big loud musical number that was going to happen. So they lost their permits. That was their whole shooting window. There was no extra time to go back. So Michael Gracie and the producers looked at various options, but it's kind of the pivotal story point of the movie, right? It's where he comes into the confidence of figuring out who he's going to be as he's part of this boy band. And so Michael Gracie just stuck on, we've got to get back to Regent Street. They did a reshoot much later. So the effects team had to manage those shots much later in the production cycle than it was ever planned for. And they got 3 more nights in Regent Street. I think it was 6 months later. It was much later in the production schedule, and put together that pivotal scene for the movie. And it wasn't just adding the monkey. Of course, there's I think 18 seamless stitches just in that sequence alone.
My notes say 36 pieces of photography put together.
Amazing.
In the before and after reel, there's some breakdowns of the rotoscoping that was required to take certain dancers off of one plate and then add them to another plate to aid in that transition from one plate to another. And my head started to hurt just managing the editorial aspects of a shot this complicated. It gets really crazy really fast. And You don't even think about it. You're watching the movie. Don't even think about it. You're just watching an incredible number.
The first time I saw the movie, I'm like, okay, well, they had to have shot this blue screen, but they're so close to these buildings. Okay, how much of this did they build? And then to find out later that they went to the real Regent Street, I don't know. You just don't see that in these kind of movies.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. The other thing I wanted to mention is the photography style of this movie. Was there was a fair bit of diffusion and shooting directly into practical lights a lot. So you're getting a ton of flaring, a ton of lens aberrations, and and again, my compositor part of my brain is like sweating every time I have to see that a third of the frame or a quarter of the frame is going to be a computer graphics element that has to fit in with all of these flares. And that's sometimes a frame by frame, section by section manual process. And again, you're not even thinking about it. It looks completely authentic and completely real in camera.
They talked a bit about their lens simulation package that they built for mimicking these flares. Maybe we can revisit this on, our lens flare episode number 20 coming up, Todd. But of course, always match all the warping of the lenses and the vignetting and all that kind of things. But with these old lenses with so many flares, they had to characterize the lenses in ways that apparently hadn't been done before, at least there, to that level of detail. So that's pretty cool to see that done because it blends really perfectly.
Yeah.
And then, the actor who plays Robbie Williams was in every shot. And Todd, you already mentioned the paint out work for that is really substantial, but then also matching his performance so articulately and bringing through his human performance on the monkey as clearly as they do. I mean, the movie lives or dies on that performance, and for me, it really worked.
Yeah, notice how we're not even talking about that part of the aspect of the show, the animation, the performance capture, the interpretation of all that data into a real performance. It's just a real character acting alongside all the other human actors. It's just normal.
And they used head cams for a bunch of shots, so they had nice close facial reference, I understand, and use the latest technologies at VFX to get that transferred onto their rigs. But if you look at the credits, there's a lot of animators on this show. This is not just to be clear, this is not just a technical process. It's a very technical process, but it is powered by artists, by animators, by lighting TDs who are taking all that on-set reference and putting it in, and compositors frame by frame painting all that in. It's really, really good artistry.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, well, that's Better Man. Jenny, do you want to take us to nominated film number 3?
Yes. Next, we have Dune Part 2, and the nominees are Paul Lambert, Stephen James, Reese Salcombe, and Jared Nevzer.
Another incredible movie.
A visual feast.
Whew. Yeah, it's like expanding, like any good sequel. It takes what was great about the first movie and then, you ain't seen nothing yet in terms of scope, in terms of scale, in terms of battle scenes. One thing that the alluding to and the almost the tease of the sandworms in the first film, where we definitely get to see some of the power of the sandworms on Arrakis in the first movie, but to tease how somebody could ride one of the sandworms and control it, to be depicted in such a way as it was done in Dune Part 2. Just incredible. I think I've watched that sequence probably a dozen times, and I'm such a sucker for setting up the geography of something like that, where you understand the scale of what is about to happen, and the audience is never really confused as to what's about to happen. Where your main character is on the edge of a dune, and he sees the sandworm coming, and the way he runs to kind of catch up to where the sandworm is about to gather, and then the dune collapsing underneath him, and then the chaos of that moment, and then eventual success, and the audience completely understands how this is working, and very little dialogue, very little explanation. Yes. It all just works, and every single shot just looks fantastic.
Really, really great shot design. That's a great example of something that is so difficult to pull off, and there's a ton of practical sand and grit in those shots, but also, billions of particles simulated by the teams at DNEG who did that work. Really, I can't tell the difference between what's what, and I care a lot about that kind of effect work. And you can't piece apart. You can't tell what's practical, what's digital. It's really, really seamlessly done. And the fact that I understand they did that stunt of that actor or the stunt double running along that ridge, and they actually pulled a rig through the sand to collapse the sand, so the stunty could that down shot over them. They could do that elements of that practically. Now, when you see the before after on there, you can see the digital artists are doing a huge amount of heavy lifting there too to finish out the environment, to add more debris into the air. But that's a really nice example of the combination of best of special effects, best of visual effects working together, and stunts too.
Yeah, and it informs the physics of the whole thing. It informs how to present scale and mass for something like this. And one of the key things about something like Dune Part 2 is that the director never cut to the types of shots like the camera of God type shots, where it looked like a struggle to photograph this action sequence, as opposed to, now we're going to give you a bird's eye view of the whole scene, or now we're going to fly from bird's eye view right into over the shoulder of the character. No, it was the camera work and shot design mimicked what the emotional part of the story, which is this is a discovery, this is an education. It's hard for him to be doing this, and it totally gets mimicked in how it was executed. Just really brilliant stuff.
So we can't talk about Dune 2 without talking about the infrared photography and the black and white scenes. Greg Fraser was a DP on this show, and we've had a number of collaborations with Greg. He's an amazing DP, and this is taking a chance. You're talking about a major Hollywood blockbuster, and you're going to do part of it in black and white. You're going to do it infrared with all. They were mentioning, they had to test everything because every costume, of course, photographs differently in infrared than you would expect. So you have to test everything in front of the camera. I mean, you always do costume tests, but nothing where the camera's completely transforming everything is going to look at. But I thought it had a striking effect in that sequence and really helped. Is that called the Jedi Prime sequence where they're setting up that there's a big Coliseum type scene with a showdown with the fighting. I mean, I thought it had a really nice look.
It's like you're watching this and you're like, it's one of those moments where truly never seen a sequence like this before in terms of this type of look. And it's not like a couple shots here, a couple shots there. They put their whole heart into the sequence then in terms of the weird look of the sequence, to the point where like the fireworks looks like amoeba exploding and stuff. It's just totally nuts. It's truly alien landscape, a truly alien environment. Love it.
Yes. And then the blue eyes, I was reading, they didn't really focus on this in the breakdown too much, right? They just kind of glossed over it, but there was hundreds of shots, right, of processing that too. Like all the big stuff, the worm riding sequences, the things that are in your face, you're there for the visual effects, but also just a ton of little details in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, and of course the battle sequence at the end. I mean, we could be talking about this forever. It's again, everybody understands the scale of these things, like a very few crummy cameras of God. You understand the momentum of who's winning, who's losing, and how they're getting surrounded. It's just remarkable stuff.
Yeah, really, really great visual storytelling and huge epic scale for sure.
Yeah,
great. Well, that takes us to nominated movie number 4.
All right. Next up is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And the nominees for this one are Eric Wenquist, Stephen Unterfranz, Paul Story, and Rodney Burke.
So much fun. Beautiful work,
What can you say about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes? I particularly loved director Wes Ball's enthusiasm for the visual effects teams that worked on this movie, very publicly praising them and considering the visual effects team as a integral partner in how this movie was getting made, as important as any of the actors, cinematographer, production design. just a very key part of it. And, hey, we appreciate that, Director Wes Ball. Thank you.
One of the sequences, actually two sequences I love in this movie, are both surrounded by water. There's the river sequence where you get this emotional moment, fantastic visual storytelling that pairs with the loss of a major character in the film. And then the end of the film, when the giant structure gets flooded and you've got all of these characters interacting with the water and the sets. More of that, the river sequence was a practical river that had been made by the special effects team. So it wasn't an existing standing river. It was water that was brought in. It was pumps that were brought in to make those fake rapids, which looked fantastic. And then those were significantly enhanced with digital visual effects, and the artists at Weta FX did that. They did, I think, all the heavy lifting on this movie. And then the missile silo flooding sequence, I think most of that was synthetic, was CG, end to end, including those sets. And
that's right.
It's a digital takeover of the movie for that climactic end scene and completely believable. You have no idea what was photographed and what was digitally created.
I have a couple stats here. There are 1,500 visual effects shots made for the film. There are only 38 shots in the movie that have no visual effects component at all. 33 minutes of the movie are entirely digital from top to bottom of the frame.
33 minutes.
And you just the camera work, the performances, everything feels so naturalistic. It's just gobsmacking. It's just incredible work.
It's interesting. I would have guessed this movie would have had 2,200 shots because it's so action-packed. So it's interesting that it's a relatively low shot count movie, and I guess that really speaks to how long we're sticking with those intense action moments, it does not make those shots easier, folks. This is living on these shots, letting them breathe, as Wes Ball did and his editorial team did with the visual effects team here. It definitely leans into some of the things that make those kind of long shots challenging for visual effects artists.
Yeah. And similar to some of the other films we talked about, performance capture aided by animators, actors driving the performances, and then animators interpreting that and making sure to maintain the integrity of that performance and making it work for the scene. The simulation on the hair, on the costumes, on the spittle, the weapons, the water interaction between the hair. It's mind-blowing stuff. Mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. When they're doing that tree sequence and it's lighting on fire, working its way up, that's another example. You've called this out a couple of times for these shows that are nominated this year. Huge, complicated action sequence in a dynamic environment, and yet you're never lost. You understand what the ticking clock is. You understand the geography of the situation. When somebody jumps, you know how hard they're going to fall because you know how high they are. This is really expert planning, blocking, cinematography, animation coming together.
And when you make a movie like this and you decide, okay, this is the type of movie it's going to be, and we are going to have humanoid creatures do humanoid things, having actors and stunt people performing them to, again, give a sense of scale and mass and volume to the actions. It makes all the difference in the world. This is not magical realism. This isn't a fantasy movie. This is something that you want to believe that you trained these apes and you were able to film these apes doing these certain things. And it totally comes through in a movie like this. The way this movie was put together, again, not at no point are you questioning how heavy these things are. Could they have actually done that? Could they have jumped from here to there? No, it just feels very plausible for this type of movie.
Todd, do you know? I don't know the answer to this question, but you said 33 minutes, all computer generated.
That's right.
CG animated. So did they do mocap sessions outside of principal photography for that? Or I don't actually know whether, if that was driven differently or the same.
I can't tell you. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, clearly when the monkeys are in the water and everything, it's a difficult motion capture environment to capture. So I can only imagine there was a ton of hand keyframed animation that blended seamlessly in with the rest of the work.
Incredible
Really impressive. Okay, 4 movies down. We got 1 to go.
All right. And last up, we have Wicked. Pablo Hellman, Jonathan Faulkner, David Shirk, and Paul Corbold.
I mean, this is great to end on Wicked. It's so fun.
I mean, talk about a daunting to this beloved show. And amazing show. But how are you going to make that work for the silver screen? How are you going to inspire the awe that you should be seeing when you see Emerald City for the first time? And boy, oh boy, they pulled it off. A combination of the incredible sets and the incredible digital effects work that worked along with the sets. Just stunning.
Yeah. I mean, end to end, everything you just highlighted. And there has been a lot of press and well-deserved press about the scale of the sets. But when you get to see those before and afters, every one of those shots was touched up with digital visual effects and artists adding in, they built sets up to 40, 50 feet tall, but there was always more in the shot than was there practically, which is, I mean, just there's no detecting any of the seams. You can't tell what's digital and what's practical when you watch the movie.
Yeah. It's really, really remarkable. I mean, there's not to mention all of the environments, but some beautiful creature, talking animal work in this movie. And I want to touch on one aspect, the flying monkeys, that they're not flying at the beginning. Yes. But they eventually become flying monkeys, and not just the extremely terrifying sequence of them attacking our main characters, but the transformation when the let's just call it the curse that is put upon these poor monkeys. The amount of empathy that I had for what they were going through is something I wasn't expecting. I really felt the pain that they were going through when their bodies were changing and the wings and feathers were breaking out of their bodies. I thought that was an incredible accomplishment from the animation team, and of course all the simulations, and it felt completely honest and plausible. But the emotional aspect of the pain that they were going through, of having their dark dream come to life, it worked on me on a level that I didn't expect. Really good stuff.
Boy, and the setup of that into the end of the film, into Defying Gravity, and to have the actors actually singing on wires being flown around a large soundstage. Those elements, when you see them in the before and afters, those are amazing looking elements. So incredible work from the stunt teams, from special effects, from the teams working together to make that happen on set. And then you can't skip over the contribution of the digital effects teams, putting in all those new capes, adding all the dynamic aspects that there's just no way to ever get on a soundstage. For Defying Gravity, all those moves, some completely synthetic, many of which are a hybrid between what they could capture on stage and what could be enhanced in post-production. It's you can't miss the end of that film for that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Really, really gorgeous stuff. And it's just such the quality of the visual effects, all, and the fantasy aspect of it all. Talk about in sync. Everything works very well together. You've got talking animals as professors of these classes. You totally buy it. You totally buy it. It's really great stuff.
Yeah. So the Defying Gravity and some of those end sequences were done by ILM, but a lot of those creatures, Framestore actually brought to life too. So it was a collaboration between those two big houses, and I think other houses that also worked on the film, but Framestore and ILM were the two lead houses. I kind of started by talking about the end, but the opening oneer of this movie, where we actually reveal the yellow brick road, we kind of get the geography of the whole place, is so wonderful, and it kind of course, ties back to the original Oz, or original Wizard of Oz. I think that shot's like 2.5 minutes long, but it's completely seamless in the film.
To dovetail with that, when the big finale, when she breaks through the glass, and the new chapter begins of her character, all of the emotion that goes along with it completely works. The animation, the momentum. I was all in at that moment.
Yeah, it works really, really well. It's super fun. And the 10-minute reel that they cut, one of the things that when you watch a cut down version of any of these reels, you realize how hard it is to condense, what's in most of these movies is 2 hours worth of visual effects work, trying to condense it down to 10 minutes. But watching that 10-minute reel reminds you how complicated it was technically to keep everything in sync with these songs, right? So it is truly a almost 2-hour music video, right? Everything had to be in sync with the music, and every bit of choreography had to be tied back to that. So where we have some flexibility on a lot of our movies and make some editorial changes and tweaks here and there, everything had to take that music into account from the very, very first moment.
On these action movies that we work on, it's like, oh, we ask editorial, this would work really a lot better if we gave this a little bit more a tail at the end, 10 more frames, or could we really kill some of this stuff at the beginning? And they're more than willing to work with us on that. First thing where it's synchronized to a song, you have to plan ahead, and it's unforgiving. You have to make sure that those moments happen at certain sync points. So from an editorial and animation point of view, it makes it that much harder.
Since we're talking about the music and the dancing, I didn't realize that they replaced all the dance floors with the show floor. So you've got hundreds of shots where you have to fix the ground to give the dancers a surface to perform on. So one of the reasons the performances are so good is those artists who do the task of erasing the dance floor that you didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
So many nice details.
There's a distinct theme of monkeys this year with the
Yes, we have some monkeys in.
Were they
3 of the 5?
Were they all made in different ways for all? It sounds like they were all created with different methods for all 3 of these films, right?
Yes, actually. I think the most commonality is probably between Better Man and Planet of the Apes. Both done at VFX, leaning into motion capture technology and head cams that seemed of a similar generation, wouldn't you say? From everything we have seen in the before and afters, I'm sure there's quite a bit of shared technology and definitely artists who have that experience there. Although, if you look at those sets of characters, they're quite different. Better Man made a lot of different creative choices with the way they stylized the face and brought the human performances in, and of course sculpted all his tattoos into all those kind of things. Versus Planet of the Apes that had a very grounded, more variations of monkeys, but all based on real monkeys that we've seen. But of course, delivering all those lines, it's really complicated work. And then Wicked's monkeys were done at ILM, different sets of technologies. That was almost all hand animated, but some motion capture reference that I think the team brought in. So different teams of artists on that one for sure. Well, this was really fun to go through the 5 nominated films. A special congratulations to the 3 ILMers that we just have to call out who have Oscar nominations this year. So Pablo Hellman was a visual effects supervisor, head of department for Wicked. David Shirk was the animation supervisor for Wicked. So big congratulations to them on their well-deserved nomination. And then Nelson Sepulveda-Fauser was ILM's visual effects supervisor on Alien Romulus. So it's super fun to have 3 folks going to the Oscars, Oscar-nominated supervisors and animation supervisors. It's very, very fun to celebrate their work and everyone else's work this year.
And we will have all 3 of those gentlemen on our next show.
All right.
Fantastic. Something to look forward to. We'll dive into their 2 shows in more detail. That'll be really fun. Well, that takes us to our martinis. Todd, what'd you bring for us today?
My martini is a drink. It's coffee. The
there
thing
you
that
go.
a lot of us need
I'm
lot
interested.
in our lives.
I'm interested.
In my household, I am the only coffee drinker. So if you have multiple coffee drinkers in your house, getting a coffee maker and buying a big ton of coffee, that's the way to do it. But I'm the only drinker, so I do single cup pour overs every day, and that works for me. Gotta grind whole beans. Come on, you gotta do that. And then if you're looking for good whole beans, and if you're not happy with the grocery store, I get mail order coffee.
Nice.
I've used 2 brands in the past, both Trade Coffee and Yes Please Coffee, and that's YESPLZ coffee. Both fantastic whole bean coffee. You can get it at whatever frequency you want. You can decide how often you get it. So if you're just a 1 cup a day person and you're the only person drinking coffee in your household, you can get the proper frequency for that. I love it that it just, I don't have to remember to get it at the grocery store. And the quality is always fantastic. So my martini is trade coffee or yes, please mail order coffee.
How do you drink your coffee? Do you drink it black?
A little bit of cream. That's it.
Okay.
There you go. Nice. Jenny.
Yeah. Okay. So in December, I visited the Nurtured by Nature Animal Sanctuary and Otter Rescue, which is just outside of San Diego.
Cool.
This has been on my bucket list for years. I always see this on Instagram and social media, and it's just been something that I've always wanted to do. So this is a nonprofit organization. It was started in 2003 by a couple named Kevin and Wendy Yates, who also founded the group Animal Educators. And that was started as a way to bring nature-based education to kids in classrooms, but it evolved into animal encounters that bring awareness to conservation efforts. So this is not a petting zoo or an overcrowded tourist trap. The rescued animals are very well cared for, and everything about the experience is crafted in the best interest of the animals. So if the animals are tired or don't want to hang out, then you just don't get to see them that day. They don't make them do anything they don't want to do. They only allow about 8 people at a time to visit the sanctuary, and I think the visitors do have to be over 16 years old. But you meet sloths, you get to feed foxes from your hand, pet
Wait.
armadillos.
You meet sloths?
Mhm.
You meet sloths, did you say? I'm
Yeah.
extra interested.
I met one. I watched it fall asleep, hanging upside down. I have a selfie with it that I will show you.
Nice.
His name was Belt, if you're interested in his name. Capybaras, which are my personal favorite. A fatty capybara named Cappuccino crawled into my lap while I fed him potatoes. So there's
No way.
nothing left in the world that I need to do now. And then at the end of the tour, you get to swim with otters. So I was
Whoa.
this was one of the most incredible things I've ever done. I was in a warm pool with 4 otters for almost an hour. They're so rowdy and fun. They climb all over you. You can play tug of war with them with their toys. You give them ice cubes to play with. And if you wear like a baggy t-shirt, they will just swim right up in your t-shirt and just hang out in there. So,
Wow.
and the experience is very, it all feels very ethical and controlled. Wendy, who's one of the owners and operators, and her daughter, Wendy, was in the pool with us the entire time. It was very educational and controlled. The caretakers gave us all the necessary instructions to be sure that the otters were safe and also having a great time. And then at the end, they do a little presentation about their conservation efforts and the organizations that they partner with, and you learn how to stay involved. And I will say that once you will commit to a species once it has crawled in your shirt with a toy and cuddled up with you like a little wet velvet blanket. So it was just an incredible experience. I highly recommend it.
That's so cool.
Nurtured by Nature Animal Sanctuary and Otter Rescue. It's I think it's about an hour east of Carlsbad, so it's in like the Carlsbad, San Diego area. I will link to their website in the show notes and their conservation partners, and maybe a picture of me with an otter.
So,
There you
that'd
go.
be great.
That's my martini.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
that
that's
is great.
fantastic.
Mine is not nearly as cute, but
Not
handy
much
around the house. Yeah, not much is as cute. I learned what this was called just the last couple of weeks. You may have heard of a French Cleat picture hanger. It is a picture hanger that has a bottom half and a top half, and they're very flat. And the basic idea is, let's see, if you make like an L with your hand, the bottom half would, well, no, it's not really an L, more like a U with your hand. There you go, a U with your hand. And then you make the opposite U with your other hand, and they kind of fit together. That's kind of how these picture hangers, you have one that's on the top, one that's on the bottom, and they kind of fit together. That's kind of how these picture hangers hang stuff on the wall. So I've seen them around studios where you put a rail on the wall, and then you just have the opposite shape on the back of your either a poster or often for like storyboard hanging. You can just move these around really conveniently. I didn't know they were called a French Cleat. And then once you know what they're called, you can Google them and buy them. Since I've learned what they are, I've used them to hang movie posters around the house because it's not the most convenient thing to get on the wall, right? Because you have to plan where the rail is and the exact size, and you got to make sure everything's straight. But it's a really nice, secure way and a very flat way to get something attached to the wall, because it's exactly like if you get a small one that can be like 3/16 of an inch, very, very thin. So your art stays very flush to the wall, which really looks nice. And it's very secure. So I've got a poster that I really like that's signed by Ron Howard. So that one is up with a French cleat. I know it's not going to fall off the wall even in an earthquake. And then you can hang heavy things with a French cleat. I hung a mantle above the fireplace. And if you do the right offsetting, you can actually get it almost completely flush against the wall. So anyway, French cleats are neat,
cool.
and they high capacity flush mounting systems. So there you go. So thank you so much for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast today. If you have a question for the show or you have an idea for a future topic, email us at lighterdarker@ilm.com. Our social media links will be in the show notes, along with the links we talked about during this episode. You're going to find all those at ilm.com/lighterdarker. That's also where we post the transcripts. So if you like the show, like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you get your shows. So please point your friends to it. We really appreciate your referrals. We want to thank Industrial Light and Magic for hosting the Lighter Darker podcast. This show is produced by Jenny Ely and myself, Rob Brado. Today's episode has been edited by David Dovell. And we want to thank ILM's PR team, led by Greg Gresby, who work behind the scenes to make all this happen. Congratulations and good luck to all the Oscar nominees. And thank you for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast. Until next time, may your pixels be both lighter and darker.